Hi, so today I'm going to be talking to you about the basics of sleep. So what we're going to cover in this video will be the sleep cycle and rhythm, sleep debt, sleep disorders, and common sleep misconceptions. So first we're going to talk about sleep cycle and rhythm. So we're going to start this off by talking about the anatomy of our brain and how that's related to sleep. So first, it's important to understand the pineal gland. It's this gland in our brain that's responsible for the production of the hormone melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone that regulates wakefulness. It's been thought to induce sleep as part of the circadian body clock, which regulates our sleep and wake cycle. And it's been studied as part of insomnia in general. Specifically, melatonin has been studied to help night shift workers and travelers cope with out of sync sleep cycles, and studied in the terms of blue light to see how phones are impacting melatonin production, it's been shown that blue light suppresses melatonin production. But there are new developments like blue light apps on our phones that can filter out blue light when we're seeing it, and blue light glasses that can filter out blue light composition of light from these sources. So speaking of the circadian clock, right above the optic chiasm lies the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So it's annotated here as SCN. This is a part of our brain that's the home to the master clock that tells us what time it is and when the sun will rise and the sun will set. And this is just an internal way of us regulating our body's hormones to coincide with when we're going to sleep and when we're going to be awake. So another hormone that's important in sleep is cortisol. So cortisol is produced by the adrenal glands in the cortex of the adrenal glands. So they sit atop of the kidney and they produce cortisol. Cortisol modulates the chronic stress response and contributes to wakefulness. So this is why it's really hard for us to sleep when we're stressed out because of our cortisol levels. Lastly is pons. So this is a part of the brain that has a cluster of neurons that deal with bodily functions, including sleep. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about different hormones that fluctuate while we're asleep and while we're awake, and specifically while we're asleep and while we're dreaming. So we have three hormones here that I'm going to talk about that fluctuate during these different stages. We're going to talk about acetylcholine, serotonin, and noradrenaline. Specifically, these hormones in the context of sleep have a special role. So acetylcholine helps your brain keep information gathered from while you're awake and sets that information as you sleep. Serotonin promotes wakefulness and inhibits rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep, and noradrenaline increases upon sleep loss, specifically REM loss, and acts in the thalamus to affect sleep spindles, which is a brain waveform that I'll talk about that occurs in non-REM sleep, and through modulating coordinated heart rate variation. So you're probably wondering, what's the difference between non-REM and REM sleep? Well, apart from the difference in these hormone levels, there's a difference in the type of sleep waves that happen and when you dream. So you dream in REM sleep primarily. So in non-REM sleep, we have these normal levels of serotonin and noradrenaline, but specifically when we're dreaming in REM sleep, we have an increase in acetylcholine. So now it's probably important to talk about the different stages and cycles in sleep. So we go through these cycles of N1, N2, N3, which used to be N3 and N4, but are now combined since 2008 in slow wave sleep, and then REM, and then the cycle repeats again. So we're going to break apart these cycles piece by piece to understand what they're doing in their function in our sleep. So first is N1. So this is slow eye movement or light sleep. We studied sleep by using a technology called an EEG, where we can get these different brain waves to understand what cycle of sleep that you're in. And using this instrument, we can see different sleep waveforms associated with different types of sleep. So M1 is composed of waves with low amplitude that are irregular, called theta waves. And then N2, our eye movement actually stops and our heart rate and breathing is really slowed. And there are theta waves and bursts of activity called K complexes and sleep spindles. So K complexes are periodic high amplitude bursts that you can see over here, and sleep spindles are occasionally high frequency bursts of activity thought to be involved in memory consolidation. And then there's N3 sleep, which was previously called stage 3 and stage 4. But now they are combined as slow wave sleep, or low frequency waves called delta waves are common here, which are high amplitude. And it's very difficult to wake someone up from sleep during these stages. It's very important for memory processing, where the brain recovers from daily activities, cognitive recovery, increased growth hormone release. So it's very important that we do get our N3 stage sleep. And then you go into REM, and this whole cycle repeats again. So the stage 1, non-REM, proceeds through all of these different stages to REM. And we have this 24-hour sleep-wake cycle which is governed by our circadian rhythm and impacted by melatonin and cortisol. So interestingly, the REM brainwave sleep actually looks pretty similar to the brainwaves that you have when you're awake. So this is a very interesting similarity, but these are the brainwaves that you have during REM. So now I'm going to talk about the sleep cycle pattern. So as I mentioned before, W here stands for awake, but we go through N1, M2, N3, and then you go into REM sleep, and then the cycle will repeat. So this is an example of someone proceeding through these different levels of sleep throughout the night. And we have an entire cycle characterized. So it's actually very interesting. So adults have a 90-minute cycle versus children's have a 50-minute cycle. So that's how long it takes you to go through all the stages of sleep. So we see here that in this individual, they're awake, then they fall into N1 sleep, then they wake up again, back to N1, and then they proceed all the way down to N3, and then they go into REM sleep, and then they're waking up. But something that's very important to note is that at the beginning of the night, the slow wave sleep is dominating. But the more time you spend asleep, then REM will start to occur. And this is very important that we get in the REM at the end of the night. So now I'm going to talk about sleep debt. So basically, when you do not sleep enough, there are some consequences with that. And they include irritability, mood disturbances, decreased performance, and slow reaction time. And it's important to sleep because along with all these different problems that can occur if you do not sleep, it can actually make it very dangerous to carry out a lot of daily living activities that we do, like driving, because of the decreased performance and slowed reaction time, where it can actually be very dangerous to drive when you have not enough sleep. It's actually recommended that adults get at least 7 hours of sleep a night. And if you get less than that, it'll continue to build up. And you will have to pay for it by getting caught up on sleep, but it's just not something that you can do over one weekend either. It takes at least 1 or more weeks to get caught up when you have sleep debt accumulating. So first, I'm going to talk about how extreme sleep deprivation can actually cause psychosis. So there's this type of sleeping called polyphasic sleep, in which individuals take 6 to 8 times a day, 20-minute naps. And in these periods, they try to consolidate their sleeping into these small segments rather than sleeping throughout the night, so they can be more productive, they say. But it's very interesting because actually doing this type of sleep schedule causes many manic or psychotic episodes throughout the day. So that's the extreme burst of energy and productivity that they're reporting is actually inducing psychosis. So that is one form of sleeping that people have tried to use to kind of cheat the system and cheat our body clock, but it actually can catch up to you. And the second concept that's important with sleep debt is REM rebound. So as I mentioned, REM happens at the end of the night after you've been sleeping for a large majority of the night. And if you cut off that REM early, that means that the next night you're going to spend more time in REM. So even though we miss REM one night, it doesn't just reset our body clock for the next night of sleep. We're going to actually spend more time there. And as I talked about before, we're really bad judges of how awake that we are. And we report that we're awake when we're actually physiologically asleep sometimes. And this is so dangerous in the context of driving. So as I mentioned before, 1 or more weeks to pay back sleep debt when you have it accumulating. So talking about driving and drowsy driving, this is our class motto: drowsiness is red alert. So what does that mean? That means that when you are driving and you feel sleepy, this is really important to pay attention to because it can actually be very dangerous. And it's something that needs to be taken more seriously, and the public doesn't talk about it as much, but is a huge issue. And because driving drowsy can cause serious consequences and is super bad. So 20% of the crashes reported have an element of fatigue involved in them. And what's more, 100,000, not 100,000 is the number of drowsy driving crashes reported every single year. And 50,000 of those result in injury and 800 result in fatalities. So it's very important to pay attention to when you are driving drowsy because you can not only put yourself at danger, but also others. So this is something that needs to be talked about more, and This is why we're trying to spread our class motto that drowsiness is red alert. So next I'm going to talk about sleep disorders. So I'm going to talk first about dysomnias, which are types of disorders that interfere with whether or not sleep occurs. First is insomnia, which is a difficulty to fall or stay asleep. So it's actually very normal to wake up during the night. The problem that results in insomnia is whether or not we can get back to bed after we wake up. So you shouldn't just go out and sleep like a rock. That's actually not normal. You should be waking up, but then going back to sleep. So the next is narcolepsy, which is excessive daytime sleepiness, abnormal REM, cataplexy, which is sudden loss of muscle control, sleep paralysis, and hypnagogic hallucinations, which are hallucinations that occur while you're going to sleep. And the next one is sleep apnea. So this is an inability to breathe due to a physical obstruction or problems with neural signaling. And this can be very common in individuals that are obese, and they're at a much higher risk for sleep apnea. So parasomnias are sleep disorders characterized by abnormal behavior during sleep. So one of them is called sleepwalking, where a person walks, talks, engages in activities or other activities while being fully asleep and doesn't remember it the next day. The next one is night terrors, when the sleeper is plunged into the fight or flight response, activating your sympathetic nervous system. They'll sit up, they'll scream, it'll last for 30 seconds to 3 minutes, and then they'll go back to sleep and don't remember it the next day. And the last one is nightmares, which is considered a parasomnia because it happens during sleep. So now I'm going to go on to sleep misconceptions. So first is boredom. A lot of people think you fall asleep because you're bored. Well, this is actually not true. So boredom does not cause sleepiness, and monotony doesn't cause sleepiness. This is because you haven't been getting sufficient sleep, or the type of sleep you've been getting hasn't been quality restorative sleep. So it's not a problem with the content that's making you fall asleep. It's you haven't been receiving sufficient sleep and are tired. So the next one is a snooze button. So a lot of people think if you press the snooze button, you can just go get some more quality sleep and go back to bed. But this is false because, as I was talking about with REM, REM occurs at the end of the night. And when you're waking up, you are cutting off your REM. So what's happening is you are trading in that really rich REM sleep for a more surface level and not as good quality sleep for the remaining like 10 minutes that you get when you press your snooze alarm. So it's actually more important to just get up when you're woken up by your alarm, because the extra sleep that you're going to be getting isn't actually going to be very helpful to you and not as restorative. So the snooze button is a scam. Next, we're going to talk about blue light. A lot of people think blue light before bed will keep you up. We talked about how blue light suppresses melatonin production in the pineal gland. So that would impact our sleepiness, right? Well, the story actually isn't so clear. So what happens is if you have been inside all day with no light exposure whatsoever, and the only light you get is some blue light from your phone before you go to bed, sure, it's going to impact you. But if you get up during the day, you're exposed to light in the morning, and you're going about your day, you have basal light exposure, and then you come home, have some blue light before bed, and then go to sleep, it's not going to impact you that much. So it actually varies depending on the amount of light you've had during the day, and it's also important to consider the content. So the content will actually keep you up more than just the blue light, because the content is what's making your brain active and awake. So it's really not just the blue light. So these are the misconceptions that I wanted to talk about. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Please feel free to email me or comment with questions. Would be happy to talk more about this. Thank you.